Hey guys, we're back here in the Lingenfelter booth at the 2019 SEMA show, and we're with Kyle Tucker of Detroit Speed and Engineering. And Kyle's here to talk to us some more about the Mark Stielow 1969 tri-tip Camaro, because Kyle was there when this car was being put together the first time by Mark, and Kyle actually was there when the car competed in the One Lap of America. Now, do you remember a lot from back then when the car was actually being built?
I do. Mark and I are going to engineering school together. It's kind of when this whole thought process came together. Mark had a beautiful Burgundy 69 Camaro when we were in school, engineering school together, and crashed that car. And it was a predecessor to this car. Really cool car, had the GTA wheels on it and mostly stock, but it was the first 69 Camaro that I'd ever remember seeing with 16-inch wheels on it. So, when that car got crashed, the whole thought process of tri-tip started.
So Mark had told us about the car that came before this one and admitted that he crashed the car, like you said. And I thought it was interesting because he said that was one of the things that made him start to wonder about the suspension on this car and why it does the things it does. Because it's kind of become notorious now for not really handling well in stock form, right?
It was. And a little inside story, Mark's a great driver, always has been, and I was supposed to go with him that night when he crashed the car. And luckily I went home from school for some reason that weekend because it took a hit. That car took a hit on the passenger side and peeled the roof off and through the passenger seat. So, it was a violent crash. And Mark and I started talking about how to make these better, and of course Mark was way ahead of me at that time on these and still ahead of a lot of us. I was a co-op student at GM, so Mark had the house that he rented, and I rented the basement from Mark as a college student, and we had a two-car garage, and that's where this car started.
So Marcus told me that kind of the key thing that he corrected, or he didn't say that he corrected, but that he wanted to improve, was that front suspension behavior. So he looked at the front suspension geometry by pulling the blueprints, because you guys were GM employees. He lowered the mounting point of the upper control arm and moved it back, and then he built a taller spindle. And then you guys did a bunch of other stuff to the car. So when it was time to actually go run the one lap, you were part of that team, and you did a lot of driving on that. Can you tell us anything about that experience?
Yeah, again, that was summer of '93, and Brock Yates Jr. doing that, and it was really it was a big deal for me because I remember I was 20 at the time, so I'm dating myself a little bit, and that summer was just a great summer. It was Mark and I, and a friend of Mark's was Tom Baker. And just a bunch of punk kids in a hot rod, right? There was all the fancy cars and the European cars and really good road racers at the time doing that. Elliott Forbes Robinson and a factory-backed Viper. So there were some serious people, and they kind of laughed at us. We'd go passing by in the middle of the night, all excited just to be a part of it. And we didn't get tired. We were young, and just we were called the Young Hot Rodders. Well, about the second track event, you grid by how fast you were on the track. So the faster you are, the higher you are in the grid, where you get to the track and you can do your laps and get out. So they put us back in 30th or 40th, I think, when we started, just deal with them, they're going to have fun. Well, about the second time out, we were gridding in the top 10, and we kept gridding higher and higher, and they started taking attention to us, and we had a blast, but we surprised a lot of people too.
So you guys were doing well in that, and then unfortunately, as Mark explained to me, one of the high-pressure fuel lines, I guess, off the fuel pump you guys were using came loose, sprayed some fuel, and you were at the wheel then, right?
I was, yeah. We had Mark and I took turns. Some of it was where Mark had some track experience, and some of it was, well, neither one of us had a clue, so we'll flip a coin and see who drives. And I drove at Loud, New Hampshire. I'd never been in that area of the country before. Mark hadn't either. And I remember that because we won overall. I won in the car overall. It was like 5:30 in the morning. We'd driven all night, previous 2 nights. Elliott Forbes Robinson, awesome road racer, and a factory-backed Viper, and here 2 punk kids in a 69 Camaro won overall. And it was scary, I remember, because it was foggy. The sun was just barely coming up. You couldn't see some of the turns. The track was partially wet. And like I said, we just didn't care, and we were running as fast as we could, and we won overall. So we really got the attention after New Hampshire. And then we went from there to another track, and then I was back, my turn to drive at Michigan International. The fastest track we'd been to with the car, Michigan International. You run the infield, and then you run the back straightaway, the 3 and 4 in the tri-oval, so a very fast track. And we went out on the recon lap, and I remember being distracted because I was going so fast the windshield wipers started floating around. So we knew the next time to tape the windshield wipers down. So anyway, as I came down to the recon lap, you have to start in one lap from a standing start. So I'd come down off the high bank, and we were getting ready to do the standing start, and I look up in the mirror, and I hear people yelling the car was on fire. And so I look around for a fire extinguisher. I'm getting spooked. The fire is back into the back seat by then. So I just get out and start running. And I remember I was running that way. Mark was running that way because it was his car and I was getting away from it. So we still joke about that. But it burned the car pretty good. The track guys got there and put it out. But, I mean, when we took it home, it burned from the rear bumper all the way up to the back of the front seats.
Now, I know Mark said that he had been telling people through the whole event, I cannot crash this car because I have to run the CarCraft Real Street Eliminator. And the car catches on fire, and you guys have maybe a month before that event?
3 or 4 weeks at most that we had, and you're right. So we get it home on a rollback. I remember nobody talked in the rollback all the way back to Royal Oak where we were, and got the car unloaded. And ironically, Mark had to go out of town on a GM trip, a business trip, and I was a co-op student, so I could get off and come work. And I stripped the car down. A buddy of ours painted it, and while Mark was gone, I put the car back together, and we hopped in the car and drove it to St. Louis, where the Real Street Eliminator was that year.
Well, the influence of this car is kind of the reason that we wanted to bring it here and talk to so many people, because it really is responsible for kind of starting a whole movement that's still going on today. And so many of the companies here and the parts that they make are all kind of out of the stuff you guys were doing back then. So we're really glad you were able to come and share some of that stuff with us. Thanks for coming over and talking to us.
You bet. No, thanks for having me. And yeah, at the time, this thing was like a spaceship. I mean, it was that far out. And you look at it today, and it's like, wow, that's cool that it's still intact. But a lot of things in the industry came from Mark and what this car is.
Well, thanks a lot again for talking to us. And it's good to see you here. I know DSE's doing real well. You're still racing and building cool cars. There's some of them here. Thanks again, guys. Mark Stielow's Camaro. Hemmings Auctions right now. It could be yours. See you next time.